We're right on a transition where the industry seems to be moving towards 4K. There's really no doubt in my mind that that's going to become the new standard. It pretty much already has become that. It's just we're waiting for it to roll out to the masses. But everyone has to ask themselves whether they need 4K or not. And there's a lot of people who have either jumped on the 4K bandwagon already or are already moving ship with cameras like the GH4 or the A7S, which can record 4K externally. There's the newly announced G7 from Panasonic, that's a Lumix camera, and the NX1 from Samsung also does 4K. And 4K is becoming a lot more affordable. And people are asking themselves, do I need 4K? But there's this other group of people who say 1080p is fine, it's good enough. And those people are wrong. 4K is desperately needed because, for one, the fact that most 1080p cameras aren't actually 1080p, that's reason enough to go 4K, because if you capture at that higher acquisition, that higher resolution, you can scale down to 1080p and actually get clean, true 1080p. I've made other videos about this. You can check them out. Things like the Canon 5D Mark III is not a 1080p camera. If you think it's 1080p, go watch that video, because it's really important to understand that just because it says 1080p on the box doesn't mean it's actually 1080p, as good as 1080 can look. So yes, you need 4K in that situation. You also need 4K if you want to do anything where you want flexibility in post-production, and that's almost all of us. We want that room, not necessarily just for cropping, but you're also getting that extra color information, you know. If you're recording with a compressed camera, like a GH4, let's say, you're only recording in a 420 color space, and having those extra pixels there, that extra resolution, is going to give you more wiggle room when you're doing your color grade as to compared to just only having 1920 by 1080. If you have the 4K, it's a little bit more color information to play with, and you can have that flexibility in post. And obviously there is the cropping element of having 4K, where you can punch in and reframe. There are some shoots where you can only have one camera. Maybe it's not feasible to have two, you only have one available, and having a camera that can capture 4K, it's a lot nicer to be able to punch in for like a second angle, if you will. I've done shoots like that where we only had the luxury of having one camera, and thankfully it was 4K, so there was room to crop in and punch in. You might want to use that for a concert or for a wedding, you know, where you can't have cameras set up everywhere, so you want to maximize and get the most out of what you're capturing. Now, in those situations, you're finalizing in 1080, and I think that's kind of what people are seeing, is that things are still being finalized in 1080. The internet and web video is just, it's only growing, it's only expanding, and most people are watching video on their phone or on their tablet or on their computer, and they're not clicking up to a higher resolution. That's okay. Even if you're finalizing in 1080, you still should capture in 4K because of the stuff that I've mentioned. You can scale down and get true 1080, you can crop, you can reframe. So even though people aren't finalizing in 4K, unless you're Netflix or the Vimeo has it now, even YouTube has 4K, but not a lot of people use that feature. It's still good to capture 4K content. There's a lot of people who talk about future proofing, and that's not always essential for, you know, a lot of different types of video content. You don't want necessarily to it's not a concern. You know, there's stuff that was captured in SD or even, you know, back on like 8mm film that's still worth watching, like home movies or old documentary footage. You know, there is a time and a place for having something that is just good enough, right? Like 1080p is right now. Almost anything can record 1080p. Most phones record 1080p even. Well, and actually now they're actually moving to 4K on phones as well. So we're moving towards 4K, and the sooner you adopt that and pick it up and implement it into your workflow, you will notice a significant difference. I couldn't go back. 4K was very prohibitive. It was not cost effective for the work that I was doing, especially considering, you know, shooting 4K with a RED camera or something like that. The file sizes were just too big, especially because it's RAW. But now that we have cameras like the GH4 that are recording compressed 4K, the file sizes are a lot more manageable, and having that extra resolution flexibility in post-production it's huge, and it makes the final product, because you're scaling down to 1080, look that much better. So anyone who says that you don't need 4K just yet, yes, it's true that a lot of stuff isn't finalizing in 4K, but as content producers and creatives, we should be capturing in 4K, because it's almost imperative to do that so that the 1080p final output looks its absolute best and looks the way we want it to.